Testing, testing. Testing, testing.
I'll talk so you can see if you can hear mine. So for breakfast this morning, which is the standard BBC question for level, I had a bagel with some cream cheese and a coffee and a banana. And I was going to have a cup of tea instead of coffee, being English, but unfortunately they ran out of hot water, which is terrible.
Wait a second, so that's the standard BBC
The
word
standard
they use?
question
Standard question?
to give audio level is, what did you have for breakfast this morning?
Why is that?
It's something that anybody can answer and they can all remember what to say. And it's easy enough. I did hear, are we recording at the moment?
Yeah, we're recording.
I thought we
but,
probably were.
you know,
No, that's cool. That's fine. I just thought I'd check.
1, 2, 3. FatEnzo.com. 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 FatEnzo.com.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 25 of the Bobby Pickles podcast. Podcasting from, well, we were going to meet at the Standard Hotel in the East Village in New York City. However, the lobby area is quite small, and they're doing a little bit of construction. So actually, we're on the Lower East Side in a little park. But anyway, with me today is Paul Campbell. Paul is a British entrepreneur, TV and radio producer, and kettle drummer. He is the founder of Amazing, the digital media brand, and the CEO of Amazing Media Group, the umbrella company of AmazingTunes.com and Amazing Radio, an ethical MP3 music library website, unlike those bastards at iTunes, and a national digital radio station broadcasting 100% new music, respectively. Calling all music lovers, concert goers, big city strap hangers, and subway commuters, yeah, that's right, I'm talking to you over there rocking the white earphones or the Beats by Dre headsets. Meet Paul Campbell.
Hello, I'm Paul Campbell. What's your name? Outstanding. Welcome to the Bobby Pickles podcast.
Bobby Pickles podcast. He always says, that's me. With that look on his face, he'll talk about anything. Tattoos, t-shirts, politics, history, and hot sauce on everything. Bobby Pickles. Pop culture, documentaries, conspiracy theories, sarcasm, and beer. It's a conversation, start listening, cause we're all here. Bobby Pickles podcast. That's me.
So, Paul Campbell, here we are, both consumed by radio in one form or another, right? Suffice it to say, a couple of entrepreneurs. Now, I'm not the owner of $1 million company yet, but I've got a big idea just like you, and I'm incredibly persistent.
I noticed that.
Therefore, I feel I can own that title too. Do you share that trait? Persistence?
Yeah, I think it's the only and the most important trait of any entrepreneur.
It is.
And I also think it comes completely naturally. That when you
It's innate?
No, I think that when you find the thing that you have to do, persistence comes with it. You have
I
no
gotcha.
alternative but to be
As
persistent.
soon as like the lightning bolt hits you,
Yeah,
the
that's
light
right.
goes off in your brain and you're like, that's what I want to do.
Correct, because you have such a strong burning sense of what you want to achieve, it becomes all-consuming, and that gives you the persistence and the energy. Energy is really important too, to carry on, because, of course, as you know very well, life is hard, and being an entrepreneur is often extremely hard. And there are always those 3 a.m. moments when you wake up thinking, I think I might be mad. When you eventually get back to sleep and then you wake up, later on, you're not worrying anymore. It's kind of odd. But nevertheless, you do need energy and persistence to keep going through the hard times, and that's what makes things work. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of entrepreneurs who have had successful businesses, and they all say the same thing, which is, there came the point of no return for me, and I carried on. And that's when a business really starts to work. Whereas I think that, by definition, if you get to the difficult times, there are always really, really difficult times. And you kind of go, do you know what, maybe I'll do something else. Then, by definition, it's broken. You can't go on. And I think the real entrepreneurs are the ones who just are so driven that they just carry on.
Absolutely. Anyway, another similarity I found, I believe I read somewhere that while in college or university, or however you blokes refer to an institution of higher education, you studied English literature, as did I. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, I went to a place called Oxford University. And
A little place called Oxford University.
yeah, I'm not sure if you've heard of it in the States.
I went to the University of Florida. It's pretty decent, but I think Oxford has me.
I think the weather was probably slightly better where you were.
Do the Brits consider English degrees as useless as their American counterparts apparently do?
Good question. It depends on which Brits. I don't, because I have an English literature degree. And I think most people who have liberal arts degrees would tend to take the view that there's a training that you get doing any kind of liberal arts degree, be it English or whatever, that's hugely valuable, and it's training of the mind.
I feel the same way you do.
Yeah.
You get like an all-encompassing education, little of everything kind of deal, but I feel like you really take a lot of knowledge out of that as far as like worldview goes.
Yes, and it teaches lots of other things. It teaches you to think. It teaches you to be dispassionate. and rational in your approach. Also teaches you to write, especially in English literature degree. Or, I mean, in Oxford, everything was done around essays. So you'd have all your tutorials were one-on-one with some leading professor or expert in something or other. There were lectures, which I confess I seldom went to, but actually you genuinely can, or you could in those days, get a degree at Oxford without going to a lot of lectures, but you just read a lot, you know.
What were you doing? You were reading, supplementing it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I arrived in Oxford, aged 18, they'd forgotten to send me the reading list. For complicated reasons. And so I went to my first tutorial and the tutor said, great, welcome to Oxford. In next week today, I'd like you to write an essay about Charles Dickens. And I went, right. And they said, so have you read all the 27 Dickens books that we sent you? And I said, I didn't get the reading list.
Oh my God, how could you even read one?
Well, it's all 800.
You know how long those are.
They're 800 pages long.
Honestly,
no
like,
pictures.
Victorian literature was like the worst for me. I did not really enjoy reading Charles Dickens.
Well, I didn't either, and the reason was that first week at university when you're supposed to be going out and meeting people and trying to get laid and all that kind of stuff, I was reading 14 hours a day just to try and catch up. So I have to confess, I've never read Dickens since, and I can't stand him now.
Okay, there's another similarity again. So here the two of us are. We were supposed to be held up at the 21-story Lower East Side luxury lodge over there, the Standard East Side Hotel, formerly the Cooper Square Hotel. But obviously we couldn't. It wasn't enough space. We find ourselves right around the block at a little park. But anyway, I still ask the question. I always ask my guests to meet me somewhere either iconic or important to them in some way. So, Paul, why the Standard Hotel? Does that have some kind of meaning to you?
It was more the idea that we would meet there and go here, actually.
It was?
Yeah, because, I mean, the Standard is a great hotel. And these days I try and stay there every time I'm in New York, which is about every 3 weeks at the moment. But I just felt the whole kind of East Village, Lower East Side, it has an energy to it and a vitality to it. And in many ways it reminds me of the way New York used to be in the 80s when I first used to come here, when I was a very young BBC producer. And it has that kind of edginess and the sense of creative people being free. Mm-hmm. That, to be honest, you don't really get on the Upper East Side, do you?
No, you don't.
So I wanted to come here, and where we're sitting now is in this park with kids playing in a playground behind us, and there's a noise of a guy with a remote-controlled car, and some people playing basketball. And directly over the street is the building where the Talking Heads used to be when they were at their peak and when they were recording, and that's where they used to hang out. And I know this because a friend of mine has a recording studio there with vintage Neve equipment, which anyone who knows about music will go, oh my God.
They would just nerd out.
Yeah, it's what makes life great. It's people with ideas and the freedom to exploit them and explore them.
So, Paul, tell me about your big idea. Like you were saying before when we were doing the intro, about getting that moment where you wake up out of your sleep and you're like, that's it. Tell me about that.
Well, the light bulb moment for me actually was in 2004. I'd been a BBC radio and TV producer. I'd been an independent TV producer based in Carnaby Street in London. I got really early on into new media. I mean, I think we built our first website in about 1993, which is kind of bleeding edge time, you know. And I'd realised...
Really?
Yeah.
It was clunky?
Yeah, it didn't work, yeah. And then at .com time, I made spades in the gold rush. You know,
did?
Building websites for people with more money than sense, and my God, there were a lot of people with more money than sense at .com time. And I ended up with enough money to go, now I want to try and find the thing I really want to do, because working for other people, although it's a creative environment, because it's a production company and so on, you never really own anything, and you always have some idiot client ringing up and saying, as was often the case, please can you come to New York for a meeting? Which is quite a long way, really, in London. It's kind of stupid. So what happened was in 2004, I was reading a biography of Steve Jobs, and he was talking about the success of the iPod, and he was quoted as saying, before we launched the iPod, it never occurred to us that it would be as big as it was. We just thought it was cool. After we launched it, it was really obvious why it became so big, because everybody loves music. And I read that sentence, and a light bulb went on. And the light bulb was associated with a question, which was, I wonder if you'll need a record label in the future. Now, today, in 2013, everybody knows that you don't really need a record label. But in 2004, that was a new question to ask. And the reason that I knew that question was partly because of my radio and TV background, partly because I was very early on into using computers as part of the creative process. I bought the first Avid in Europe, which is online editing, video editing on a computer. My production company was doing desktop digital production when nobody else was doing desktop digital production, and making content for lots of different platforms at the same time, which also nobody was doing then. Everyone does it today. We were doing it 20 years ago. And the final relevant thing is that I'm a musician, or as you said at the beginning of this, a kettle drummer. I prefer to say timpanist, if you don't mind. Kettle drum's not what professional people call it.
Yes, I said that, obviously.
In jest, I'll forgive you. Just this once. I mean, I started learning...
So it's a timpani?
Timpani
The
in
timpani.
England. Yeah. It's spelled differently in America.
It's like classical orchestra percussion.
That's right, yeah.
Right?
Basically, I was trained from the age of 9 as a classical percussionist, which includes everything from snare drum and bass drum and xylophone to timpani or kettle drums. And I made my professional debut aged 11.
Really?
And I've still been playing professionally to this day. My next professional concert, playing with a professional symphony orchestra, is a week on Thursday, doing Shostakovich Ninth Symphony. But I'm also capable of being unsquare occasionally, so I play a lot of jazz and a lot of rock and stuff like that.
Do they use the timpani they use it in different genres of music?
Mostly in orchestral stuff.
Mostly?
Not much else. But, it
would sound pretty cool, like pretty jazzy on Lower East Side. You get like a stand-up bassist or something like that, right?
That's a really good idea. That would be good fun.
You do some poetry or something, too.
Yeah. When you're good at these things, and I'm reasonably good, you can actually play tunes on them, so it's actually, it's not just C and G or D and A or whatever
the
notes might be. But, I had 6 drum kits, so give me a chance here. I do actually play noisy drums as as posh drums, yeah.
And were you ever in any bands?
Well, I knew you were going to say that. My nearest claim to fame was when I was 17, and I was gigging a lot. I was doing sessions for the BBC while I was still at school. I was playing in the Royal Albert Hall and places like that, so I was kind of a good drummer, And a friend of mine was a drummer in a jazz rock band in my hometown of Newcastle, which is where Newcastle Brown Ale comes from.
Oh, hell yeah.
And where a not very good football team called Newcastle United, soccer team, comes from as well, sadly, because that's the team I support. And my mate was a drummer in this jazz rock band, and he rang me up one time and said, could you do a dep for me? In other words, could I deputise for him? Because his girlfriend was giving him grief that he was never around because he was always gigging. So I agreed to do this dep for him.
What does that mean, dep?
Well, it means that I come and be the drummer for a gig instead of him, and he goes off with his girlfriend.
Gotcha.
It's deputising, short for deputising. So I was booked to be a dep for this gig, and it was in 2 weeks' time. And then a week before the gig, Steve rang up and said, I'm really sorry, but the gig's off because the band split up. And I said, oh, my God, why? Because you guys were about to get a record deal and everything. And he said, because Gordon's left. Gordon was the bass player. I said, shit, why's that happened? Oh, he's left his job, he's moved to London, he's going to be a rock star, and he's formed a trio. And I said, a trio? Trios never work. What's he called it? The Police. What a shit name.
Are you serious?
I'm serious, yeah. So I was a week away from playing with Sting, which is all very droll. So that's my nearest claim to fame, and the gig never happened, so it's probably not much of a claim to fame at all.
So that's when you're 17?
Yeah, I was 17. And then what happened, basically, was my father... Dads have this annoying ability to say things that you don't want to hear, but you need to hear. And he had this sentence once where he said to me, Paul, you're a good drummer, but there are lots of good drummers, and you also have a brain. Why don't you use that? And, it was kind of crushing, but also important to hear that. So I didn't go to music college as I had been wanting. I went to Oxford instead, and I described what happened afterwards. Anyway, so there I was, reading this biography of Jobs, and with all that experience as a performing musician behind me as well, or with me, I guess. Although I've never written a song, I don't have that kind of a brain. I'm a drummer. My job is to support people who do have that kind of creativity in their music. I'm a good drummer, but I'm not a songwriter, okay? So you put together the broadcasting, the digital technology bit, and the music bit, and that kind of gave me the context to wonder if you'd need a record label. And basically what we've done is we've followed the logic of that spark. And the thing I run now is called Amazing. I mean, our fundamental purpose is to ruin the word amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I enjoy that word amazing. I like outstanding, though.
Yeah, I can tell. Well, you can use outstanding as your brand, and I'll use amazing as mine. How about that?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the joke is it's kind of a bit like virgin, And so when you hear the word virgin, there's a high probability that most people in the world, their first thought will be Richard Branson and Virgin America and so on, rather than the original meaning of the word virgin. And I want to spoil amazing in the same way. What I want you to do is I want you to think of amazing and immediately think that cool, ethical place that helps creative people get discovered, and does so in a fair way and in an inventive and original way as well.
Is there really such thing as an ethical company?
I believe so, yeah. I think it's a hell of a lot better than the alternative of being an unethical company. There's a lot of them, God knows. But I think that when I started this, the idea was to try and help musicians with the fundamental problem that they face today, which is digital technology allows you to create a digital asset to a higher standard and lower cost than ever before in history. So you can create incredible things. I mean, my MacBook Pro has a umpteen-track digital recording studio in it of outstanding quality. And if you know what you're doing, you can produce genuinely incredible results with that stuff. And it costs almost nothing.
What do you think about podcasting? It's the same deal. If you do have the wherewithal and you know how to... I mean, I have a little bit of experience in terrestrial radio. I worked at WMNF in Tampa, Florida. You know, and these are the field recorders that we would use at the station and the same microphones as well. But if you have the wherewithal, if you know Adobe Audition or Pro Tools or any of these things, you can create your own, basically, radio show.
It's the same.
And you can put it on to these different media players.
It's exactly the same. But the problem is, especially with musicians, because so much music is being made, that there are two problems. First of all, nobody will ever hear the music you make, and secondly, you'll never make any money out of it. So the mission of Amazing is to try to address those two problems. Help people get discovered, help them make money. And because I'm a musician myself, and a lot of my friends are musicians, and because I've worked in broadcasting, I've seen what the conventional music industry habitually does to musicians, which is basically try and rip them off.
Right.
And I was determined when we started this that we would not do it in that way, and that we would construct a business model that would allow us to treat people fairly and ethically.
So can you tell me a little bit about the business model? Like, so basically, if I go to amazingtunes.com,
Yeah. Well,
what happens?
The beginning of it is, if you're a musician and you've written and recorded a song and it's an original song, you upload an MP3 to amazingtunes.com. Amazingtunes.com is kind of a cross between iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud, by which I mean SoundCloud you can upload, iTunes you can download, Spotify you can stream and listen. And it has social media elements within it as well. So you upload your tune, I listen to it. If I like your tune, I'll dig it, so I'll rate it, recommend it, tag it, tell my friends, download it, purchase it, whatever. If I download your tune, you will get 100% of the download revenue. While all that's happening, our clever little algorithms that sit in the background watch what's going on, and they tell us if a tune is popular and if people are listening to it a lot. You know, if I upload a tune, because I'm only a drummer, it will be terrible, so no one will listen to it. If you upload a tune, Bobby, being talented, it will be brilliant, so lots of people will listen to it. So it gives us kind of an early warning signal. And then in addition to that, we have guys who work for us in the office who are obsessed with music, and we have something like 25 DJs who are chosen because they have a lot of experience and very good ears, who all choose music as well. So that set of things, the automation, the kids and the DJs, curates the content and tells us what's good. And then we put the best of the tunes and the most popular of the tunes on our radio stations.
So you actually have a real radio station.
Yes, we do.
And it's a national radio station, correct? All throughout the UK?
It was. It isn't anymore, actually, which is a long story, but it's in London and the South East now. And it's also online, obviously, and it's on mobile apps and things like that as well. I'm not sure if you're familiar with a British radio DJ from the BBC called John Peel. There's a John Peel stage at Glastonbury Festival.
I apologize for my ignorance. However, I have not heard of this.
Well,
gentleman.
you're an American. It's to be expected. I'm joking.
It's quite all right. I called you a bloke.
Well, John Peel basically was a famous DJ for 40 years in the UK on BBC Radio 1, and he always and only ever played new music. On one show 3 hours a week. Amazing radio is like 24/7 John Peel.
What is this concept, new music, that you keep mentioning? New music. So these are just unsigned people. They haven't had a lot of exposure yet. You're finding these people,
yeah,
right?
It's the next generation of musicians. So it's not necessarily unsigned. We do a mixture of unsigned and indie labels. We won't handle any new music from any major labels. And the reason is we are here to help people who need help. If you're with a major label, they can help. That's what they're for, you know. So actually, we're here to help the little guy, the kid in the bedroom, the band who are obsessively touring and they can't even afford a van, and you see them all over this town. In fact, I saw a band literally up the street a couple of nights ago, you know, loading drums without cases into the back of a sedan.
Right.
You know.
Well, when I first met you, I was telling you about how I go down in the subway systems, and sometimes I'll record these different subway performers all throughout here. Right?
Yeah, there's such extraordinary talent in this town, in Austin, in LA, in New York.
Austin, what do
Austin,
they call
Texas.
it? The blueberry and the I forgot the exact quote. The blueberry and the red something. Talk about there's one little pocket of liberalism basically
oh, yes,
right
that's
there.
right. It's funny actually. I was heading down to South by Southwest
Yes.
for the first time a few years ago, and a friend of mine who lives in LA said, "How are you getting there? Are you flying straight to Austin?" And I said, "No, I couldn't get a flight, so I'm flying to Dallas and then driving down." And she said, "Word of advice: don't say anything liberal until you get to Austin." But these big cities, Williamsburg, classic case in point, and
It's basically an extension of the L line, honestly. If you go on Union Square in the subway in Union Square station, and then you take that over to the East Village right there, you take one over. There's everybody's playing. Keep going, Williamsburg. Everybody's playing. It's just that whole L line extension.
Well, I tell you, the L line, it extends to Europe. It goes through London. It goes through all the major cities in England. It goes to Germany. It goes to Scandinavia. There's a big L line terminus in Scandinavia because all the world over there are extraordinarily talented people making music, new music. Sometimes they are 18 years old or younger. Sometimes they're in their 50s. But they all have this burning passion and this innovation and this desire to express. It's actually not even a desire, this need to express themselves. They can't do anything but write songs. And what's worrying is that in the olden days, there used to be a thing called the music industry, which kind of worked. It was unfair and it was greedy and rapacious and it would rip musicians off. But at least there was a mechanism that would make it possible for some kid in a bedroom in some little town somewhere in the States or in England to get discovered.
How?
Through a process called A&R, Artists and Repertoire, which was the major labels had people whose job was to stand in grotty pubs and bars listening to bands all the time. And they would find a band that they liked and they would sign them and they would help develop
Scouts,
them.
huh?
Scouts, yeah. Now, what's happened over the years is the old model of the music industry has started to implode. It hasn't imploded completely, nor will it, but it's changed enormously. And the result is that a lot of the major labels are becoming like antique dealers now. They want to re-release the Beatles 1,000 times.
Amazing Tunes is basically a scout,
Correct.
right?
Somebody described it as the world's largest A&R department.
Absolutely. And then what you have is people scouting themselves, basically, right?
Yeah, people upload music and the community tells us what's good. It's very democratic. And we put them on the radio, and one reason for that is everybody who's in a band wants to be on the radio. I mean, I was 14 years old when I heard a song that I was played on the radio for the first time. I could take you to where I was standing right now.
Tell me.
It was in my mother's kitchen in North Shields in the northeast of England. And it has the most incredible emotional impact on you, because it's kind of validation and excitement. It's real, it's grown up. It says all of that practicing and all of that worrying and all of that crafting a song and all those hours in damp basement studios trying to record something that sounds good was worth it because people like it.
Yeah, see, you actually got a positive, a lot of people don't. But at such a young age, you're able to hear the fruits of your labor on radio.
Yeah, and that's why we have a radio station in Amazing. And, every day there will be bands all over the world posting tweets saying, "Oh my God, I'm on Amazing Radio." And you'll get bands in Australia, because a lot of people in Australia upload to Amazing Tunes, who will tweet that they're on the radio in England and they can listen to it online or on a mobile app. They can't actually hear it on the radio, but they know it's on the radio, and that's just an important thing. And that's kind of the model that we developed. Basically, Amazing Tunes is the upload place, and it's where you buy the music. Everything we play on the radio is available on Amazing Tunes, so you can always find it if you like it as a listener. Amazing Radio is the marketing channel, if you like, for what we do. We have a bunch of other things. So we have a chart, which is published every week by a magazine called Music Week, which is like the Billboard of the UK. We do sessions with the best of the bands where we put them in a studio and we record them and we film them. So we're building up a catalogue of people before they were famous. And what's happened over the last 6 years, because we've been doing this a long time, is we are finding bands before anybody else in the world. So, for example, there's a band that's breaking big in the States now called Alt J, A-L-T, new word, letter J, as in, Alt J on a computer keyboard, who won a Mercury Prize last year and are becoming really big. It's a fabulous British indie band, and we've been playing them since 2010. There's a guy in this town called Daniel Glass who runs Glass Note Records, who is absolutely, in my view, the leading indie record label at the moment. He signed Mumford & Sons. They didn't do too badly. He's now signed 2 new bands, which we discovered, called Daughter and Churches. Daughter, I think, is the potential to be the next Adele. You know, I mean, we're finding these extraordinarily gifted artists years before anybody else.
And then now you're coming to America, though, right? I mean, this is a London-based business, but you're here in New York City a lot. Why all the globetrotting?
Oh, because I just like being tired. No, I'm...
Sarcasm.
I know it's unusual for British people to be ironic, isn't
I know. Aren't you supposed to be dry?
Yeah, it's supposed to be, aren't we? Yeah.
I like that.
You think I could ever catch on in America?
I think you could.
Irony?
Absolutely.
Not sure about that. Yes, the reason I'm here all the time is to test out my sense of humor on Americans and see if they understand a word I say. No, the other reason is because the idea behind Amazing is the big idea. It's about trying to reconstruct the music industry in a brand new, disintermediated way that's very disruptive. I mean, I'm using lots of D words, and they're the kind of words you use when you talk to venture capitalists, but they're actually true in our case. You know, we are rewriting the way that music gets discovered and doing it in a way that's radically different from the way anyone's ever done it before, and it scales like nobody's business, which is tremendously important. And because of that, and because it's such a big idea, and because I feel so passionate about it, we want more people to have the benefit of it, both as bands who need to get discovered and listeners who love new music. So the rational and obvious way to do that is to try and launch it in the States. Now, we are already in the States in the sense that we have people who work for us over here, we have DJs here, we have A&R people here, we have listeners here by the tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands, and we have bands in the thousands uploading tunes every day from America. But we don't have a big presence here at the moment. We've never, ever had any money to spend on marketing. We've never promoted ourselves.
Why not?
Because we haven't had any money, really. You know, it's a startup, you know. And every money we've had, we've poured into promoting the bands and improving the service, you know. So, and actually, in a weird kind of a way, the radio station is marketing, I guess, but it's not like, you know, having adverts on bus stops. So where we're at now is we've got to a stage where the business works as a business, it makes money, it's radically different from anything anyone else in the world is doing, so we want to do it here. So my obsessive travelling, I mean, I think that this is my third trip since you and I met, and we only met about a month ago.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of impressive.
That's a lot. And you were just mentioning you were in L.A.,
Yeah,
right?
Oh, this week's been quite a sensible trip. I mean, my last trip, I did 5 cities in 5 days. I was LA, San Francisco, back to LA, DC, Boston, and New York in 5 days. This one was going to be a sensible one because I started on the West Coast, spent 3 or 4 days in LA, came to New York for 6 nights. And now I've gone and buggered it all up because I've got to go to San Francisco on Tuesday for a couple of meetings.
That sounds like a fun life to me.
It's.
However, are you married?
I am.
What about your family, you being away from them so much?
It's very difficult, but we have Skype, you know, which is good. So, for example, yesterday I had a long Skype call with my son, who's 9. We just bought some chickens.
Skype is amazing, isn't it?
It's incredible. Yeah,
it really
incredible.
is.
It just transforms lives, really. We just bought some chickens 2 weeks before I came back to the States, and some of them were laying and not all of them were laying, and he showed me the blue egg that we got from the one that hadn't been laying. And it tastes like a normal egg, but the outside of the egg is blue.
Really?
So we were very excited, and it was lovely to be able to see this blue egg on Skype.
What do you have, a farm?
No, we just
A lot of
just have
property?
what you would call a yard, you know. But there's enough space to do that, to have a few chickens.
Right.
So yeah, it's difficult on the family. But for example, in the summer, the plan is to bring the family over and rent a house somewhere and be here all the time. But the fundamental driver is this is a good idea. It deserves to happen, and
It does.
I'm here to make it bigger in the
What do you think
States.
about iTunes? I mean, I was joking around saying that they're a bunch of bastards. You know, there's jest, obviously, but there's truth in jest. But what are your thoughts on that? About
Well, first of all,
are you in competition with iTunes?
Not really, no. I mean, iTunes is complementary to what we do. I mean, iTunes basically is a new record shop, isn't it? It's a new way of being a record shop. It doesn't change anything fundamental because what they do is they have royalties distribution, which is on exactly the same model as it's always been, which basically translates as if you're a musician, you won't get anything. If you're a musician who's unsigned, probably nobody will ever hear your music if it's on iTunes, or certainly not enough people. And if you're a musician who's with a major label, you'll get just as little from iTunes as you would from the sale in the shop. So it doesn't really change anything much. It's new technology.
Why does the person who's making all the art not make any money?
Because the world is full of greedy people and lawyers, and because when the music industry was first created, it was very difficult to distribute and very difficult to record. So there was a premium on the people who had the access to capital to be able to pay for the recording and pay for the distribution. It was exactly the same in broadcasting. It's the same in Hollywood.
Can you tell me about how you got your start? You started off with the Beeb, correct?
Beeb, yes.
I read that somewhere.
Auntie,
it's called
as we like to call it.
That's what else? What else do they call it?
Oh, they're called Auntie, or Auntie, A-U-N-T-I.
Auntie?
Yes.
Why Auntie?
I don't know. For years, the BBC was... I think it's because they were sort of familiar and they were in the corner of the room and you sort of trusted them like a family member. So
it's a national...
Yeah.
It's a national corporation. It's like...
yeah, the BBC is an extraordinary thing. Yeah. So my break in it, when I was still a student, I used to work in local radio, BBC local radio, in the vacation. So I would get up at 4 a.m. and go and work as a technical operator on the breakfast show in BBC Radio Newcastle. And then...
They only had to say the title of the show when they were doing their sound checks, correct? Sorry, that was stupid.
I don't know what you mean.
Well, it was called The Breakfast.
I see, right. Yeah, I got you. I know what you mean now.
Say that was bad.
Yeah, it was okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I worked there as a student, and that was fun because it was a real experience, and it was quite good money, actually. And then I ended up, in my final year at Oxford, working for BBC Radio Oxford as well, 5 days a week. So I wasn't doing a lot of studying, but I was earning a lot of money, and I was working for the BBC. And the result was when I left university, I applied for 4 jobs, all 4 of them at the BBC, and I was offered all of them. And there were 3 training courses and a job as a radio producer. And in the end, I took one of the jobs, which is a training course, which is the one traditionally from which the Director General of the BBC is selected in 30 years on, which is the Director General is the CEO of the BBC. And I took that job.
So you wanted to get on the pathway.
Yeah, I was kind of, hot shot kind of thing. It was one of those jobs where there were 30,000 applicants and 4 places kind of thing. So it was an incredible privilege to have the management training thing. And you arrived as kind of a little lord, and everyone sort of, they didn't quite tug their forelock and bow down to you, but there's a real sense of
privilege. A little
cocky? Me?
Yeah.
No, I don't think I was cocky, actually. I think partly because I come from the north of England, I just felt bewildered and grateful and thought it was all a terrible mistake and I would get found out any minute.
That's awesome. That's a good, humbling way to keep it, right?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I think I've always been like that. Maybe it's just being a drummer, and maybe it's the experience of playing a lot of crap gigs and sitting at the back and, having to put your drums in and out of a car when you're tired and the lead singer's getting off with some gorgeous-looking bird and you're not. Maybe that's what makes you humble.
So what the heck does a producer do, really?
In the BBC, the producer is the person with overall responsibility for a programme. So whether it's radio or TV, you decide what the programme is about, what's in it, who's in it, and you make it happen. And you also have budget responsibility as well. In television, it's the same. The distinction between a director and a producer is that the director looks after the pictures and the producer looks after the content in other senses and is the overall boss. I've done both in television. I've been director and a producer, and in radio they don't have directors. So that was my break, and I ended up as apparently the youngest ever BBC producer making radio programs for something called Radio 4, which is the main speech channel. It's kind of like NPR, and it's a national network program. So I used to make current affairs documentaries.
Really?
Which basically meant lugging a very heavy Nagra tape recorder around the world and getting on an aeroplane with a bunch of press cuttings in your bag and no idea what the program was going to be about. And a week later, you'd go back to England with hundreds and hundreds of quarter-inch tapes and try and make sense of it all. And 3 days later, you had to have a 40-minute documentary on the air.
How fun.
It was incredible fun and incredibly demanding.
God, that sounds so awesome. It really does. Do you like documentaries?
Yeah, well, these were documentaries.
Do you enjoy watching other documentaries?
Yeah, I do. I find it easier to watch TV now than I used to do because now I don't work in TV anymore. I used to do. And the problem is if you're in TV is you never see the program, you always see the way the program's made. Mm-hmm. And if there's an edit that's not very good, it hurts physically. And if they cross the line when directing, which is a directing concept where you get your cameras in the wrong place, it really hurts. As time goes on and you get a little bit further away from that, you can start to enjoy it a bit more naturally. So
you enjoy radio more than television?
Well, the pictures are better in radio, aren't they? Radio is the most beautiful medium because it's simple and there's not much to get in the way. Here's 2 guys sitting in a park with 2 microphones and a recorder, and you don't have to have lights and you don't have to have cameras and tripods and you don't have to have a crew. Television is a lot better than it used to be. When I started in TV, there would be 4 cars that turned up to every shoot. There would be the cameraman, the sound recordist, the lighting man. They all had their own cars.
Right.
And then us in production in our own vehicle. It was a nightmare, and everything was complicated, and everything was very hidebound with old-fashioned rules, and the technology was clunky and didn't work very well. It was very difficult, and radio was beautifully simple in comparison. Nowadays, TV's got a hell of a lot easier, but unfortunately in the result, it's also become downgraded. There's too much of it now. There's not enough critical mass of talent to make decent TV.
How's your relationship right now with the Beeb?
Oh, it's really close. I mean,
it is?
Aren't
they in direct competition with you, sort of, kind of? What is this BBC introducing I read about?
You're very good at doing your research. BBC introducing is a similar thing to what we do. And it is competitive to us. The difference is that it works in the UK and we work globally. The BBC is, in my opinion, the best broadcasting institution in the world. And I hope and believe it will remain that forever. What we're doing with Amazing is a tiny, pale reflection of the BBC. It is inspired by a lot of the BBC values because I'm a BBC person to my marrow. Mm-hmm. And, I believe in...
And that's how you learned?
That's how I learned, yeah. And I fundamentally believe
So you take that with you?
Yeah. You can't get it out of you. It's engraved on your heart, So the concept of public service broadcasting, trying to be honest and straight and tell the truth, drives the BBC and has done for 80 years. It's what drives me, and Amazing. And in a weird kind of a way, Amazing is an attempt to create a private sector, profit-making, international version of the BBC.
Nice. They say a lot of the best creativity... Wait. Good artists borrow, great artists steal. Basically. You're taking something that was on a lower level. What came first? Amazing or BBC introducing?
BBC introducing happened first, yeah.
Happened first?
I mean, in the sense that people have always sent tapes to the BBC. I mentioned John Peel earlier. There have always been kids putting cassettes into envelopes and sending them off to some BBC producer somewhere. However, the BBC has recently increased what BBC Introducing does, and in the process it's become more directly competitive with us, which is kind of unfair, because we are a private sector company funded by investors struggling to build something that will help GDP. Mm-hmm. And the BBC is, I sometimes think of it as like a very large pig. I mean, apparently if you're a pig farmer, there's a metaphor coming up here, guys. Apparently if you're a pig farmer, one of the problems you have is very large, very corpulent sows give birth to a litter of piglets. And the sow is lying there all fat on the ground, hardly able to get up. And the little piggies are running around it and trying to get onto a teat to get some milk. And the sow turns over and squashes the piglets to death because it doesn't realise they're there. And in some ways, the BBC is like that sow.
Wow.
It has the ability, absent-mindedly, without intending it, to squash little businesses to death because of its power, reach, and revenue. It's improved a little bit recently, partly because of economic changes in the UK. But there is a risk that the BBC can do that to other businesses. And to be fair, the senior guys in the BBC, many of whom are lifelong friends of mine, because I've worked with them when we were trainees, know that there's that risk. But what we're trying to do with Amazing Tunes and Amazing Radio, is to be a global business, not a UK business. We come from the UK. The UK is our laboratory. The UK is quite good at music. We did have the Beatles and the Stones and Adele, after all.
Right.
And we're also quite good at broadcasting because we had the BBC. So really, we're trying to synthesize some of the ethics and values of the best of that and then do it in an international way. In the States, the way that we grow that is not by being British, because I'm only some Englishman. I don't begin to understand America. And it would be foolish and arrogant.
You don't?
No, of course not. It would be foolish and arrogant of me to pretend that I do.
Why don't you?
Pronounce the language properly, for Christ's sake,
It's the same language.
But spelt wrong.
Spelt wrong.
Yeah.
But I mean, we acquired English breakfast, right?
You did?
I believe so, right? Eggs? Isn't eggs and coffee?
Yes, that's true. Your bacon's not very good.
Bacon's not very good.
No.
There's a lot of similarities.
There are, yeah. No, I love America to bits, but my point is I don't really understand it. So we're hiring a whole load of really, really smart Americans to come and run the American business because that's what it needs, And it's the old story. The Brits are quite good at creativity and Americans are good at scaling things. And hopefully that's what will happen.
Mm-hmm. Now, this name, Amazing Tunes, I mean, I know you went over it a little bit. How you're joking about how you're going to do that with the word right? But how did you come up with the name Amazing? I mean, that is a cocky name, right?
Well, I'm pleased to say it wasn't my idea.
It wasn't.
No. What happened was the very first idea that I had, I set up an education business with the money I made at .com time, because I really believe in education.
So you made a lot of money during .com
I did
time,
okay.
huh?
I did okay, yeah.
And then you got...
a lot of money in the UK is not the same as a lot of money in America.
But when you said you found yourself with enough money where you're like, okay, that's it, now I want to do what I want to do in life, you know? And I don't want to work for somebody else.
I could retire or anything like that.
No, but you want to turn it into
something
so that
real,
you can retire, right? So that you can make a lot of money. You're going to take the money that you have and you're going to roll it into.
To be honest with you, it's not about making money. And I think that every successful
Isn't
entrepreneur...
everything, though, really?
No, I really don't think that's true, you know. I think that successful entrepreneurs are people who are driven by a desire to make something happen. And if they do it well, then they make money. Mm-hmm. And I think that if people are driven by the desire to make a lot of money, go and work in the city. Go and be a lawyer or something like that. Because there will be so many difficult times in the course of trying to make a real business that if you're only driven by a fast buck, you will give up.
Major in finance, not English. Especially if you're going to live in New York City.
Well, you might be right, yeah. So the first thing I did was I set up an educational publishing business, making content for schools. And the idea came from the head teacher of my old school, who I bumped into. And he said, "What are you doing now?" And I said, "I'm running an internet business." And he said, why is, in very, very sort of plummy English, why is there nothing decent on the internet for A-level students? Now, A-level is 17, 18-year-olds, okay, in the UK. It's an important exam that you do. And I said, that's kind of weird. You'd think there'd be lots of stuff on the internet for A-level students. And he said, well, the problem is there's too much, and none of them find the good stuff. So I went, what do you mean? And he said, well, you basically explained that they're using the internet, and I did a King Lear from Shakespeare for A-level. I'm sure you're familiar with that play. If you put King Lear into Google, you get 250,000 results. Now, if you're an 18-year-old kid, how are you supposed to know which of those results is the right one for you for the level that you're studying at school? So he told me about this, and I said, that sounds like a market opportunity. So we put together a joint venture with the leading private schools in the UK, Eton, Harrow, Winchester, that kind of crowd, where the teachers from those schools chose the best websites for each particular subject, and I built a system and paid for it. And we called it Study Links. And now if you put King Lear into this resulting, it's the educational search engine, you won't get 250,000 results, you'll get 7. Chosen by the head of English at one of the leading schools in the world, who tells you why they're helpful, what they're helpful for, and what you should use them for. So it's a kind of a simple but
so that's
sensible
how it was
idea.
kind of like a Google kind of deal.
Google with a brain.
With a brain.
Yeah, Google with a teacher's brain is kind
Right.
of the thing. Anyway, so we built this thing. It was called Study Links. And one day I was talking to the guy who did all the English literature content for that. And we were having a coffee.
Tell me he's wrong.
What?
Say you're completely wrong on all these things.
No, I didn't say that.
I was English literature at Oxford.
No, yeah, well, so was he.
Did you go to school with him?
No, I didn't know. No, before. No. We were having a coffee, and he was joking around, and he said, I had an idea, Paul. He said, I think we should change the name of this. We shouldn't call it Study Links. We should call it Amazing Grades. So I looked at him, and I said, do you know, I think we probably shall. So we changed the name to Amazing Grades, and then I started thinking, Jesus, that's a good name. You know, that has the characteristics of Virgin, that it's a stupid name, and therefore you'll remember it. And that was the beginning of it. And then I started thinking, I wonder if that's the brand that I've been searching for 10 years, that I could use to hang the bigger business on that I want to do. And then I started thinking about what else to do beyond education, and that's when I had the idea that I mentioned and the light bulb moment reading that book about Steve Jobs. Mm-hmm. So that's where the Amazing brand came from. And I love the fact it wasn't even my idea.
Yeah, no, I have some friends like that. There's some like idiot savants when it comes to business, and they just spit something out, and you're like, wow. Like my friend Bob, you know, I'm a chronic entrepreneur. I'm always trying to start up something, and this is years ago, but we did a little magazine called Hispanglo Savings Magazine. It was Spanish to English because I'm from Florida. And so we were going to do like a coupon book, basically. But my friend Bob was involved as well, and we changed it to Imagine Savings Magazine.
Wonderful.
And we actually got sales on this thing.
Fantastic.
It wasn't even printed.
Yeah.
Went around and sold to different mom and pop shops and stuff like that.
It's
But it's that, the name, it's like so ridiculous. I was thinking so into it, Hispanglo, Hispanic and Anglo and all these things. He's like, let's just call it Imagine Savings
It's
Magazine.
got to be something that you remember, don't you? And sometimes I spend a lot of my time these days, you know, advising young entrepreneurs and trying to help them. And quite often, one of their main problems is they've got a really shitty name.
Can you advise me?
Yeah, sure.
Advise me right now. Okay?
Okay. Well,
Not to be too pushy.
that's fine. It's good to be pushy. It's important. Well, you're already pushy anyway, Bob. You know that perfectly well. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here.
Why did you decide to do the interview?
Because I liked you when we met. And I recognized a fellow spirit and an entrepreneur.
Awesome. Okay, so let's, if I can. So I have two things I do. I do the podcast, obviously, and that's going well. But I also make T-shirts, and they're based on people of history, politics, and pop culture, dead people, obviously, so for the licensing and whatnot. But the name of the brand is called Fat Enzo, and it's named after my dog, Enzo, who's fat. And the logo is a silhouette of him taking a poop, and he's crapping out a T-shirt.
Well, that's memorable because the first
Be truthful with me. A lot of people, I've asked many people about this. I've showed many people this. I get all kinds of different things. Some people love it. They love the name Fat Enzo. They love the dog pooping. Other people despise the dog pooping. I would never buy a shirt with a dog pooping as the logo.
Do you own fatenzo.com?
Yes.
Good. I think my instinct is that Fat Enzo is a memorable name, and you should probably get rid of the poop.
Really?
I think that if it's a cute fat dog, that's enough. A cute fat dog pooping, maybe not necessary.
Right.
So the pooping says something about your brand identity, doesn't it? And is that what you want to say about the brand identity?
Well, it does have a meaning to it, you know. I mean, it's crapping. It's all sarcasm. It's all satirical. It's all ironic.
Yeah,
what more ironic than a dog
I can
pooping?
see that. Yeah, there's kind of. Well, I'm not sure that's ironic.
I mean,
that's
it's
just scatological.
It's and then the what's scatological mean?
It
by
means
the way,
it's to do with pooping.
okay. that's all. Yes, it
Not
is.
to be confused with eschatological, which is to do with the last things.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not spelled quite the same.
Thank you for the English lesson.
You're most welcome. We have all kinds of words in England that nobody should have or ever uses. It's hilarious. When I'm over in the States, I spend my entire time translating all these words that I just think, can I say that? And I'm always saying to people, do you have that word?
You have to say it. Why should you even be hung up on that?
Well, because people don't know what you're talking about, and the purpose of language is communication. So,
Absolutely.
for example, I was having a conversation with an investment banker about someone who is just agreed to invest in my business, who's quite well known. And I said, yeah, we were in touch a year ago, and I've been tickling his tummy ever since. And the guy said, what did you say? And I said, I've been tickling his tummy. And he said, what's that mean? And I suddenly realised it's one of those, and it comes from fishing, that when you're trying to catch, I think it's a trout, you get it on the end of the line, and apparently what you do is you tickle its tummy, and the result is it comes out and goes into your net, and you can take it out and eat it. It's a very common phrase in England, so if you're tickling someone's tummy, it means that you're taking your time and trying to make friends with them because you want to get somewhere. But it doesn't translate, and that happens all the time in England. I mean, for an Englishman in New York, you know.
Right.
You just don't know. You just have to be translating. I can't even say my name here. So I go into Starbucks or somewhere to grab a coffee, and they say, what name is it? And I go, Paul. And they go, I'm sorry. And I go, Paul. And they go, I'm sorry. And I go, oh, okay, Paul. And they go, oh, Paul.
So what do you think about the overall idea of the T-shirts?
I sense that that's the thing that drives you, and you've got to be driven. I think you might need to think, I mean, I'm sorry to say this, given we're on a podcast, you might want to have a think about the role of the podcasting thing. Does that distract you from the T-shirt thing? You've given up the job you were doing beforehand to focus on the T-shirts. That's good, and it shows commitment, and there's nothing like being...
No, I believe that the podcast is going to be
a promotional mechanism?
all-encompassing. Yes.
Right.
It'll
Well,
be everything.
that's fine. I mean, I was assuming that you were going to do that the purpose of podcasting is to promote the
I
T-shirt
feel like the
business.
T-shirt, yes.
So it's the Bobby Pickles podcast sponsored by Fat Enzo.
Correct. That's how it
that's
starts.
cool.
It always starts out with the theme music, the Fat Enzo theme
Right,
music, and
right.
it ends with it as well. We obviously have our Bobby
That
Pickles theme
makes sense.
music in there.
So my questions are then...
But the way people are monetizing these podcasts, they go and you're talking about ethical companies, right?
Yeah.
They go out and they get sponsorships,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking, hey, listen, the only sponsor I will have is my own company.
Perfect. That's good.
And it has to do with, it's the same thing, this documentary kind of deal where I'm talking to you about your life, about your business, you know, documenting a very somewhat unconventional, very interesting person. And those are the kinds of people that I like highlighting on my shirts.
Yeah.
Obviously dead people,
Yes.
however, you know, unlike yourself.
I'm
But
not
we
to be
will
on one
all-
of your shirts for some time.
We're
yet.
all going to be there sometime because we're all human. We're all going to die someday,
Yeah.
right? And I believe that we're all the same, essentially. And it really goes down to my whole thing of like being an entrepreneur where anybody, and I wanted to ask you how you felt about this as well. What do you feel about like the universe?
That's quite a big question, that, isn't it?
Do you or do you not share the same sentiment as I that through the power of your thoughts and actions and persistence, you can literally make your dreams come true?
100%. 100%. I've always thought that, actually. And from being a little kid, when I dreamt something, I went out to try and get it, and 9 times out of 10 it happened. In many ways, when it didn't happen, it was better for me because it made me try harder the next time on the next thing. But I completely believe that you can make things happen if you try. You have to try. You have to keep going, and you have to not give up. And you have to accept that setbacks are a normal part of that process, and they're how you learn. When we learn to walk, we fall over a lot. We just don't remember it when we know how to walk because we're no longer 1 year old. I'm a ski teacher, qualified ski instructor, snow skiing, and I'm very familiar with the experience of people who put a pair of skis on for the first time in adulthood and say, I can never do this.
Man, that's so funny. You're striking a chord right now because growing up in Florida, I didn't do a lot of skiing. However, when I moved up here, I went snowboarding for the first time with my friend, and he brought me up to the baby hill, and I went down a couple times, and I didn't fall.
Yeah.
And he goes, God damn it, you're a natural. Let's
Good
go on
for
the
you.
thing.
Fantastic.
I wasn't a natural.
All right.
We went all the way up to
All
the
right.
top of the mountain, and I fell continuously the entire way down.
Well, falling is how we learn, and making mistakes is how we learn, and it's the natural thing. And sometimes people suffer the problem of being very successful all the time.
Like you.
Well, I was very successful in my early years, and I then had many years of struggle.
Right out of college, you were making money, right?
That was much more common in those days. Bear in mind, I was born in 1827. Sometimes feels like that when I get out on an aeroplane. No, I'm 54 years old, so it was a different world in 1980 when I left Oxford than it is today, even in the UK.
Because I feel like, we talked about that humbling feeling that you get, and we were talking about how you said you felt it, but I find you really do find it when you have experienced financial success, right? I had my own health, life, and variable annuity insurance agency in Florida, and I employed my father, my brother, all my high school friends, and we made a lot of money for like 3 years. It's like out of college, $10,000 a month for 3 years. That's how much I was making. I remember I yelled at this person one time, and I said, fuck you, I made $10,000 a month, you scumbag, or whatever like that. Like just very, after 2008 and experiencing this whole financial decline and whatnot, that particular brand of health insurance that we were marketing left, and we weren't making the same amount of money. And that's basically when I reached that crossroads of what am I going to do in life, and I decided on developing this t-shirt brand.
Yeah.
But going from that and then working like a shit job, making absolutely no money is so humbling.
Yeah.
And I think
it's essential.
Important to do that. Hemingway said, the world breaks us all, and some of us are stronger in the broken places, right?
Everyone's stronger in the broken places. And Winston...
He said some of us.
Oh, well, okay. Well...
Because
yeah,
not all of us...
That is true.
Not all of us rebound and they want to keep...
And I think that's the difference of those with the entrepreneurial spirit, that they're the ones who bounce back. Winston Churchill had a great line where he said, success is the ability to go from disaster to disaster without losing your enthusiasm.
I like that.
I like that one too. I mean, I think that success is the product of failure if you try again and if you keep going. And you only can guarantee, if you're learning to walk and you don't get up again, then you don't learn to walk. If you're learning to snowboard and you fall over and you don't get up again, you don't learn to snowboard.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to learn how to snowboard. I don't know if it's...
Try snow skiing. It's much easier.
It is?
Yeah, it is. Well, you've got 2 feet, and they're not clamped together. And these days with the equipment in skiing, it's so much quicker to learn. I mean, I learned in my early 20s and became an instructor in my late 20s because I got so obsessed with it. It's much easier to learn to ski now than it used to be then because the equipment is easier to turn and the boots are better and the bindings are better. And try it. And it's actually becoming cooler than snowboarding now. Honest.
I think I will someday.
To go back to your business.
Yes.
I mean, the first thing I want to say, Bobby, is that it's blindingly obvious to me that in 5 years' time, I will be asking you to come to a park so I can interview you about your brilliant success, because you've clearly got it.
I do?
You've clearly got it. No question. I think you know that you've got it, because you know that you've had success early on, the way you described, and you know that you keep going when you have difficult times.
Right. And when I hit that downturn in the market in 2008, I asked my friend Dinesh, who's an Indian. That was my college roommate. And the reason why I was able to get through college, to be honest with you, we weren't allowed to have TVs in the house. And I got straight A's and stuff like that, living with this guy. I was like, what should I do? I'm done with the insurance. What should I do? I'm trying to figure out Bobby, take everything, put it out of your brain, think about what it is that you want to do in life. Don't put any roadblocks in front of you or whatever. Just think of it like using all your assets, all your abilities. What do you want to do all throughout your day and where it doesn't feel like work and you're actually working? And so I thought about that. I meditated on it. And I came up with this idea. I was like, I enjoy being creative. And actually, I have a lot of tattoos. I don't know. They're not all the way down my arms or anything like that. But I have a lot of ridiculous tattoos, right? And they're about like people of history, politics, Mark Twain, Hunter S. Thompson, all these people I have tattooed on me. And I used to like get joy. It's not even just like getting the tattoo, but actually like the creative process of coming up with the design for the tattoo, And I'm realizing, why am I going to brand myself all over my body? I'm going to run out of room here. If I can get it all out of my system and come up with a great graphic design and screen print on a T-shirt, that takes care of that. I don't have to get tattooed, and I can sell, I can make money. Sales, I enjoy sales, but I enjoy selling my own products.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so that's where I devised it, and it's been for 4 years now. January 9th, 2009.
And you're making money out of it?
No, I'll be honest with you. I'm not making the money that I want to right now, but I'm making that next step now.
You're making sales?
I learned, so when I started, like he was saying, don't put any roadblocks. I don't know how to do graphic design, or I didn't then. Didn't know how to do graphic design. I have an English degree. Didn't really know the Photoshop or Illustrator or anything like that. Didn't know how to screen print. Didn't know how to do any of that. Took a screen printing class. Worked for a guy for free, mopping up his floors while I was working another full-time job. Eventually steamroll that into actually working at a screen printing place, learning the business from start to finish. Go to NYU, learn how to do graphic design, Photoshop, Illustrator, all that stuff. And then I just learned it over this last 4 years from start to finish. And I'm at that point where this is what I want to do 100%. This is what I'm going to focus on 100% of the time, right? And now we're ready to bring it to market. I'm going to be printing all this stuff like next week, literally. And I'll be in time to be out there, Union Square, these different squares and parks throughout New York City, and vending, direct marketing, selling our products, selling our T-shirts. And hopefully it goes well,
Well, I'm sure it will, and I'm sure that you'll sell them well. I haven't seen any of the T-shirts yet, so I don't know exactly what they're like.
I can show you really quick.
Yeah, you could, couldn't you? And then I could criticize it. That would be good.
Yeah. Yeah, really fast, though.
Listener, he is on his iPad. Wrong, he's on his iPhone. Sorry, I should know the difference, shouldn't I, at my age? And he's looking for a picture.
Everything's on the iPhone.
While that happened, I could describe the surroundings here.
All right, here you
go.
go.
No, they're there already. All right, so it's... yeah, those are good. Listeners, you'll have to go to fatenzo.com to see them. Oh, that's a really good one. I like that one. That's a good one, too. And that one. Yes, that all works.
Right.
There we are. We're being cryptical here, aren't we?
Yes. Bukowski, Bobby Kennedy, Hunter S. Thompson, Bruce Lee.
Abraham Lincoln, I saw that in the end.
Abraham, yeah, he'll go on there, too.
Yeah.
We'll think of something kind of witty for him.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying, And I think that there's a market for it. You're talking about, like, the Wikipedia generation. Talk about... You could do anything you want to do. You could podcast if you want to. If you want to buy all the equipment, put together your own radio show, you can do it if you want to, right?
You can.
You can self-educate. There's no reason, really. I mean, I have a degree from a brick-and-mortar institution, but with all these, like, internet, for-profit colleges coming about and whatnot, or Wikipedia. I mean, you can just Wikipedia or anything and learn about damn near anything, or documentary films and stuff like that. I mean, it's a lot of self-education going on, and I feel like more people will be open to this, like, intellectual T-shirts by these different people from history.
I think you're right, and I think a lot of people will look at that and they'll laugh and they'll buy them, which is what you want. One question, though, is that really the big business that you're going to have, Bobby? Because at the end of the day, lots of people can make T-shirts. What's unique and special about those T-shirts that's going to make them uncopyable, that's going to make it grow and scale? It's one of the things that I've had to come to terms with, because my first couple of businesses, they made good money, and they had a nice lifestyle and so on, but they would never have become big businesses because they were reliant on other clients.
We have a dog taking a poop as a logo.
Well, I think that's probably the beginning and end of it all then. Enough said.
That's what's going to set us apart.
It might. I mean, my point is that when you're entrepreneurial, you have lots of ideas.
Well,
and each idea leads to the next idea. And then one of them will become the big idea,
Right.
And as long as you're having fun and moving forwards, that's what matters. It doesn't have to be the be-all and end-all with each, Fat Enzo T-shirts might not be your big idea. It might be something along the way to the next idea. Or it might be that you pivot Fat Enzo and you go, do you know what? T-shirts is great, but if I use Fat Enzo over here, that's even better. and it might be what you do. I mean, if you look at Amazing now, Amazing Tunes and Amazing Radio and so on, it's a million miles away from where I originally expected it to be. The way we make money had never occurred to me when we first started. And actually, a listener of the radio station suggested it, and I went, that's a good idea. And that's now how we make money.
See, that's how I get a lot of my ideas.
Yeah.
From other people. People say something.
It's a continuum, isn't it? There's not a kind of a...
It is. And
it's not a digital process, it's analog.
And I do understand where you're coming from as far as the Fat Enzo thing. But really, honestly, it is a thing that I want to do. That is the big idea for me.
Well, in that case, it'll work. If you're so committed to it.
Because one thing that I find, and I know a lot of entrepreneurial people, there seems to be in your, as you're thinking up your big idea and you're on your road, your entrepreneurial road, a lot of people start T-shirt companies. I mean, there's a hell of a lot of people out there that start T-shirt companies.
Yes.
It's because a lot of people think like, oh, what a great way to make money is being creative and things like that. But I am going after it differently than other people. A lot of people in their stories, they made something or whatever, and they gave up when they experienced like a downturn. But I'm going after it because this genuinely is what I want to do. I want to make retarded T-shirts. I don't want to get tattooed all over myself, and I want to be creative and come up with things and come up with ideas and be a writer, because it is writing. It's like copywriting, like when you're working at an ad agency or something like that. Anyway, sorry to derail the whole conversation.
No, you haven't. No, it's important to have these conversations, and if you're that driven, that's great. I mean, I suppose all I'm trying to say is be open to the possibility that Fat Enzo might lead to something else that's even better. Or it might lead to a different version of Fat Enzo that's even better than T-shirts. Because I think that's how most entrepreneurs develop. It's constant iteration, and it's recognizing if something isn't working and changing, and trying and being experimental, rather than assuming that the idea you had on day one is necessarily the only way to be. And quite often when people fail in business, it's because they don't listen to the feedback, and they don't think about the fundamentals, and they keep going anyway. It's a difficult balancing act, right?
It's true, because I've gotten a lot of feedback and from people that I admire, I respect, said the same damn thing as you.
No,
Fat Enzo, great name. Think about dropping the dog pooping.
Well, maybe that's the thing that makes the brand cut through, in which case it's probably worth keeping. But
Okay.
I suspect that, I haven't even seen the image. It might be so hilarious that I love it at the moment I see it, but it might be that you're turning off too many customers with the poop. Or it may be that they all go, I remember it, isn't that the thing with the poop? It depends on the strength of the imagery, I think, actually, is the answer to that. But in any case, your brand is not about pooping. Your brand is about whatever other values you want your brand to represent. So I think people who get involved in Amazing know what we represent, which is trying to give people of talent and access to opportunity in a fair way. That's quite a clearly defined thing. And what's quite interesting is that people play it back to me a lot, which would probably suggest that the message gets through. Whereas I've had other businesses in the past and other ideas where people had no clue what I was up to, and neither did I. And that tends to tell you as well.
So, Paul Campbell, what did we learn today on this little podcast in the park in the Lower East Side of Manhattan?
Well, I think we learned that the Lower East Side of Manhattan on a Sunday morning is a lovely place to be.
It is.
And that you're a great guy to talk to.
Despite the fact that, oh my God, you see that dude? I was when we were in a conversation.
Yeah,
the guy who just whipped it out, took a piss right there.
Oh, did he?
Yeah,
See,
that guy was a gem.
Radio with pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, we've been scatological, that's what we've mainly learned. We've learned about piss and poop.
Absolutely.
So we've learned what scatological means.
But
and
not...
we've started to address the question of just how big is Bobby's business going to be?
Just how big is it?
It's going to be enormous.
You're
Bobby.
very intuitive, correct?
Thank you. Yeah, I am. Yeah.
So what do you think? Tell me. Blow me up.
I think you're the kind of guy who does very well, especially in America, because you have the right attitude and the right determination. So I think you will do really well. Whether that's with Fat Enzo, with or without the poop, and whether it's with T-shirts, not sure. Time will tell. But it almost doesn't matter.
What do you think about the podcast? What do you think about Talk Radio Podcast? I know we touched on it briefly, very briefly. Is there an area of that at all you would ever explore? I mean, is it just music or...
Well, the eventual idea for Amazing is that we follow the logic of the informing principle, which is you can create a digital asset, but no one will hear it and you won't make any money. And we move the brand eventually beyond music. We want to establish it as a music brand, first of all, helping musicians and get to be known so that Amazing is the go-to place for new and emerging music. But then we will try and help the other people who can make digital assets, who are called comedians and photographers and digital artists and filmmakers and short story writers and podcasters and poets, all of whom can create a digital asset which will go nowhere and where they'll make no money. So eventually I'd like to be able to help them as well. But we'll do it from a position, hopefully, of strength, having established the brand in music. Why in music? Global language, emotional appeal, small file size.
What should people do if they want to hear some awesome music?
Go to amazingradio.com or go to the iTunes, the App Store and the Google Store and download an app called Amazing Radio, all one word. And just listen to some stuff and then just explore. And then you can find anything you ever hear from the radio station on amazingtunes.com. If you're a musician listening to this and you write and record your own music, upload some tunes to amazingtunes.com and we'll try and help you.
Paul Campbell, thank you so much for meeting me today and being on my podcast. I really appreciate it.
Bobby Pickles, it's been an absolute pleasure.
For the Bobby Pickles podcast, from a random park bench on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, I'm Bobby Pickles.
FatEnzo.com, 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 FatEnzo.com. FatEnzo.com, 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 FatEnzo.com.